Hi everybody, Paul B here. Wanted to relate a fascinating story to you. This happened on the day after Christmas. As usual, a little bit of background first. When I left my loud and violent apartment, June 1st, I moved into a motel. And it was in the outskirts of the Twin Cities metro area. And one reason I did that was to get out as far as possible from the Twin Cities metro area. And I had my stuff in storage and I was selling it to, if I had sold even 10% of it immediately, that would have been plenty to get me out of Minnesota, which is what I wanted all along, because I want to get back to work. I have been wanting to get back to work and get my career back all along. And it's illegal for me to do that without a permanent residence in this great state of Minnesota. Likewise, I cannot receive mail, I cannot get a P.O. box, cannot collect unemployment even though I was eligible for it. Can't do anything you need to do to get back on your feet in the state of Minnesota. It's all illegal. By all appearances, that's their way of exterminating the homeless quietly, silently, off camera, where nobody will ever know what happened to them. That's certainly what's happening to me. Anyway, so I had moved all my stuff to the outskirts, but it wasn't the absolute outskirts. It was like the second to the last ring. And I picked it mainly because of the cost of the storage facility. So when I went out there to that community, it was a concrete jungle. It was like a 3-mile long shopping mall, and their strip malls have Super America, Cub Foods, Dollar Store, Best Buy. I can't even remember what they are. I don't do any shopping to speak of, but the set of stores, if you go 3 miles away to the west, the exact same set of stores are there. They're just jumbled around in a different order. The exact same stores: Cub Foods, Best Buy, Super America. You know, it's the same group. Then you go 3 miles south, and it's the same group all over again. Quite literally, Cub Foods is their big grocery shopping out here. Quite literally, I think if I stood in the center of those two that are to the west and then south, I could probably see both Cub Foods at the same time. It's just ludicrous. Everything is the same out here. It's the same group of stores. They all look the same. They all have the same dirty blonde brickwork. And this is kind of the point I've been trying to make. This is what I've been trapped in for 9 years, is this concrete jungle of corporatized, materialistic television culture. And of course I don't watch television, so it's really awkward for me because the way these people behave is truly bizarre. And if you go to a television, you're going to see why they behave that way. It tells them to behave that way, and they obey. But the point is, when you have this same shopping center over and over and over, you know, dozens and dozens and dozens of times around the whole metro area, same group of stores, look exactly the same, what does that do to the population? It makes them the same, which helps explain the problem, one of the big problems I've had in Minnesota, which is that people are very bland. They have no personality. Of all the people I've met, it's very difficult for me to think, okay, well, I remember this person here, and I remember that person there, to try to distinguish between the two. I mean, they look the same, they act the same, they think the same, they believe the same, they gather and process information about the world they live in the same, which means their critical thinking skills are very, very poor, but they're uniform, they're the same, because the rotten school system out here, that's how they train them to process information about the world they live in. Now, this is one of the characteristics of a cult. If you look at the Jehovah's Witnesses or Scientologists or something, these people don't show a whole lot of unique personality necessarily. Even Tom Cruise lost a lot of his cool when he joined Scientology, because he began to assimilate into this uniform way of looking at the world and behaving and thinking. and believing. Now, since Minnesota is a cult, and it's a huge cult, and it's a very dangerous cult, these people in the Twin Cities metro area are dominated by that, and to certain different extents, different people are very, they zero in on that uniformity, which is Minnesota, that cult. Very bland, no personality, hardly any sense of humor, no excitability, no passion, nothing that makes a human being something better than an animal. Really, I mean, to me, they just look like cattle. They're just like cattle. I can't tell one from another. I mean, I look at a field full of cows, and I love cows. You go pat a cow on the back, and you've got a friend for life. But well, you can't do that with a Minnesotan. They'll kill you if you try to show them any affection. But anyway, the point is, with this cult mentality that dominates Minnesota, and when I say Minnesota, the Twin Cities is I think it's the vast majority of the population. If not, it's certainly the majority. 5 million people in the state, and between St. Paul, Minneapolis, and Duluth, I don't know what the percentage is. It could be as high as maybe 80% of the population. I don't know offhand. But it's most of the population. The other people live in the outskirts in this huge state. They live in small towns, farming towns, country folk. So where I moved to be in that hotel so I could sell off my stuff, and I had my stuff in storage, was in the second to the last ring from the Twin Cities. So I was still within this cult. So where I was with the hotel was just as bad as New Brighton. The people were boring. They were dumb. They had no interest in anything. You couldn't light a fire of fascination under them. Nothing interested them. They were just boring, bland cows. They're just cattle. They're sheeple, some people call them. Over Christmas, I moved out to that last ring, and I did so mainly because I have nothing left to sell. I sold that stuff and lost it by attrition because I was so far out of the cities. I couldn't get people on Craigslist to come out and see it and buy it. So if I had sold 10% of what I had right away, I would have had enough to go. And instead, I lost everything by attrition, and I had to let things go for pennies on the dollar. So I lost tens and tens and tens of thousands of dollars on that alone, just on the stuff I had in storage, which right now is down to almost nothing more than a couple boxes of junk and a few clothes, and there isn't empty boxes. I've lost everything. So now that I don't really have anything left to sell to work with, I moved out to that latter ring to see what's going on out there. And that's where I am right now. That's where I was over Christmas. That's where that Catholic church I told you about put me up for a night in a motel, so I could get some sleep in peace and get a shower. Now, I'm at this large gas station, very large gas station, serves, basically the travelers coming in and out of the cities. And Christmas night, December 25th, overnight into the 26th, somewhere in there around 3 a.m. I went inside, and there were 2 older women working, and there really weren't any people. And one of them came over, and she just had this big smile, and she, "Hi!" And she just chatted me up a bit, and she was very nice, and, maybe within a minute, she extended her hand and told me her name and asked for my name. She introduced herself. And this is what's new. In 9 years in Minnesota, I don't think I've ever had anyone do that outside of the workplace. And where I worked, everything was insincere. Liars, deceivers, they didn't care. I shook the new president's hand and told him what I'd do for him, and he told me what he'd do for me. And I did exactly what I said I was going to do for him. He destroyed me. So his handshake wasn't worth... I mean, you hear those people who say, "Oh my gosh, I shook the Beatles' hands, I'll never wash it again." It's like I feel like cutting my hand off for ever touching that piece of crap. President of a company. His word was worth jack diddly. Anyway. That's what I'm trying to get away from by being in this outer ring, getting as far away as I can. This lady chatted me up. She introduced herself. No one has done that in 9 years, and I never even realized it. It was after she did it, I just thought to myself, my God, nobody has done this simple courtesy, this simple social norm that exists everywhere else in the country. Anywhere else I've ever been, that's the way it is. People chat you up a bit, they introduce themselves, they want to hear your name, they tell you their name. And it may go to friendship, or you may never see them again, but it's just a common courtesy. It's a social norm. Except in this cult of Minnesota. I was always the person who would introduce myself first. And even then, they were really awkward about it. They didn't like it. But this is the first time someone did it to me in 9 years outside of the workplace. So I was talking to the woman, and I just mentioned, well, I'm down here from New Brighton. Had a really, really, really bad time in New Brighton. I'm trying to find a way to see the world, as a happy place after living in a place like that for so many years. And she went, oh yeah. Well, and then she proceeded to just matter-of-factly say, well, yeah, New Brighton is like that. New Brighton's very snotty, snooty, stuck-up, mean, pretentious kind of place. It's just it's not a cool place to live unless you're like that. And I was just taken aback, and I was like, what? This is a native Minnesotan. She grew up here, and she's, maybe 55, 60 now. And she's talking about New Brighton that way and accurately. So I talked to her a bit more, and she wasn't railing against New Brighton. She didn't have anything in particular against New Brighton. That's just how New Brighton is, and she knows it. And she just said it matter-of-factly, and she was done. So I got her to talk about it a bit more, and she had a family member who moved. Excuse me. You can see the sun. That means it's cold, and it means we're going to get pummeled with snow. That's what the sun means in a Minnesota winter. Tomorrow we're supposed to get 6 to 10 inches of snow, so I'm looking for a place to park my car and be stranded for 2 or 3 or 4 days. Anyhow, so she told me that a family member moved to New Brighton many years ago to become a Lutheran pastor, and that individual was heartbroken. And what she described that this pastor went through was really, she was talking about what I experienced when I sent out those 100 requests for assistance to 100 Minnesota churches. And then, of course, I started in New Brighton. I think I got every church in New Brighton because that's where I was. Those are the people who elected these rotten city council members, and who allow police officers like the one who destroyed my life to continue to have a job. These are the people who elected those kinds of just rotten humanity. So I thought they should know about it. They should know about the website, and they should know what they've done. They should know the kind of people they put into office. That these people don't care if other people live or die. They are as good as murderers. And I don't hesitate to say that because I'm dying. And these people have never said thank you. They've never said I'm sorry. They've never said a word. They just let it happen, and they go about their business. Watching me die with these videos and the website over the course of these last 4 years, to people in New Brighton and people like the city council and everything, based on their demonstrated behavior where they've never apologized, never taken up a collection to help me, never done anything to show any remorse or conscience at all. They're proving that watching me die is like them driving down the highway and seeing a carcass 50 feet off the highway, not even knowing if it's a cow or a wolf or a dog or a human, and just, and then they've forgotten it. They've just forgotten it. And now they're looking at their destination. It's all about them. And was that a small child who's on the missing persons list on the side? They don't know because they don't care. They've just been a dog. That's how the people in New Brighton are, as they sit and they watch me die on these videos and the website, and when I went to visit the city council and everything. They're rotten to the core. But that's what you would expect in a mean, vicious cult. One that is very much like Scientology. Anyway, so this woman was talking about that, with her relative, who was the Lutheran pastor, was absolutely heartbroken because that's exactly what he described in his congregation. Now, he was the leader, and it's hard to be a pastor. I mean, you are the leader, and these days there's so many political and social strings attached. You have to think this way about gay marriage, even though the Bible says this. And it's very hard to be a pastor, and it's easy to lead your church into apostasy, which is what's happening right now. It sounds to me like her relative did not want to do that. He wanted to be a good shepherd. He wanted to be a good leader of a church and say, no, this is what the Bible says. I don't care what CNN says. I don't care what Michael Moore says. This is what the Bible says, and I'm a pastor teaching the Bible. This is the impression I got, that this is what her family member was like. And that's why he was heartbroken, because his congregation was a bunch of snotty, snooty, deceitful, insincere, not even really Christian, just all for show. They went to church for show, which is one of the main complaints I've heard about Minnesota, is that there's a church on every corner, but there's almost no sincere religious people to be found. So anyway, the thing is, to have a native Minnesotan describe anything in Minnesota that way is new to me, but to have them have some personal knowledge of New Brighton, and the way she offered it, if you talk to me about New Brighton, if you ask me, Paul, what's your opinion of New Brighton, Minnesota? It's like the lion's about to roar. That's like asking a 6-year prisoner of war in Vietnam to describe what he thinks of the Viet Cong. You're going to get a long answer. You're going to get an angry answer. You're going to get a furious answer from me. But she had no axe to grind. This is just matter of fact. This is the way New Brighton is. It's a piece of shit community. It's just a bunch of snotty, snooty, bland, boring. What she was here's the thing. What she was describing in her own words, and she describes herself proudly as country folk. I'm all for that. Bless her heart. What she was describing was the cult of Meannesota. Now, obviously, she's never framed it in that way. The reason on my website there's a section on Minnesota is to define Minnesota as distinct from Minnesota. Now, I have a feeling it covers the majority of people in Minnesota, but a lot of the reason for that is because the majority of the population is in the Twin Cities metro area or Duluth. Now, I can't speak to Duluth. I haven't been there. But the sheer numbers of people in the Twin Cities versus out of the 5 million that are in all of Minnesota, if it isn't the majority, it's so many that, and if nothing else, they dominate the state. This is where the state government is, and the state government here is just batshit crazy. These people, you think, I don't even want to get on that topic. These people they have no concept of what government is. As far as I'm concerned, they're traitors. They should understand what a government is supposed to do and what a government is not supposed to do, constitutionally and such. They just see it as an opportunity to line their pockets with money, to improve their own business deals, to make sure that they can afford a second or third house and a cabin, nice car, and that more than anything, that they can impose their own personal will, their own personal standards of behavior on every other person at gunpoint. That's what the Minnesota state legislature and the governor is like, and from what I can tell, the judicial system as well. It is a really scary betrayal of what constitutional government was supposed to be. Well, what do you expect when a cult takes over the state government? And the cult is centered on the Twin Cities, which is the population center. So it's not to say that you're not going to find Minnesota in Duluth, or up in the Iron Range in the northern part by Canada, or down here where it's... I'm still pretty close to the cities. I'm too close. I don't feel comfortable being here. But the fact is, if I look to the south, I see fields, and those fields continue probably until Kansas City, unless Des Moines is in between. So this is about the edge, and these are good country folk out here. So after this experience with her, where she described that, and she wasn't harping on it, I had to try to milk this information out of her. She didn't want to sit there and talk about New Brighton or the city folk or anything, but she answered questions, and she answered them honestly and quite articulately. She had reasons for what she believed was the main thing. It wasn't just like, oh, we're country folk, those city folks are a bunch of jackasses. That's not what she was saying. She had specific reasons for why she had a problem with these people. And I've never seen that from the people she's talking about in the cities. They're just like, oh, you're just a jackass. You're a stupid moron. You know, they never give you a reason for anything. They just personally dislike you, and from that point on, you're as good as dead. That's the cult of Minnesota. As you can tell, look where I'm living after working so hard for 8 years. Alright, so the last part of the story then is, well, after that experience, so the next day I go into that gas station, and the people there have been very nice all along. I like them a lot. But, so I just kind of asked them a few probing questions. They were busier. It was the day, so I didn't get as many answers. But it was very consistent. They all had the same basic feeling. They didn't all necessarily know about New Brighton. But the thing was, I realized I can think right now in my head, inside this gas station, maybe 5 people who work there. 4 girls and 1 guy. Yeah. Maybe 5 girls, then 1 guy. Just like that, I can think of their different personalities, their different sense of humors, their different temperaments. I mean, in the little bit of time I've known these people, which is about a day and a half, I already know, in terms of social norms, how to speak to this one versus how to speak to this one. Because they're not bland and boring. They're not the exact same uniform cult that you see in Minnesota. They have unique personalities. They obviously have different levels of maybe intelligence, education, and such. They're good people. I like them. They are like the people I knew in the rest of the world until I moved to the Twin Cities. And it gives me some hope, and it helps explain why I made such an effort to distinguish Minnesota from Minnesota. A lot of people look at that in reverse. They look and they say, they look at Minnesota and they go, oh gosh, here's this guy who's just, he hates Minnesota, so he came up with some cute little name for it. It's like, no, that isn't what I'm doing. The reason I came up with a name specifically for this cult, Minnesota, is to make sure that I did not apply that to everybody in Minnesota. Minnesota is a huge state. It's in terms of landmass, it's one of the biggest states in the Union. Population-wise, it's pretty small. It only has 5 million people. I am definitely not talking about every Minnesotan. That's why I came up with the name Meannesota, to single out this cult of uniform people who are exactly the same. You can't tell one from another. When I think of the New Brighton City Council, I really can't think of anything that distinguishes one from another. They just all look like a bunch of sheep, a bunch of cattle. I can't say, well, you know, Mayor Jacobson has a wonderful sense of humor, and this one here is really well educated. They're just all a bunch of bland nothingness. It's like someone went in and scooped out all the gray matter and stuck these lobotomies on the city council. That's how I visualize it anyway. And yet, after just one day here at this gas station, I see a diversity in these people that's amazing, just astounding. That's the way it is in the rest of the world. That's the problem with cults. Cults force people into this little narrow box. Oh, just lost my light. And the cult of Minnesota is dangerous because I am not a part of that box. I will not sit in that box. And even the people who've tried to, quote, help me over these months have all done so by telling me to climb into that box, to join the cult. And I can't break through to them. That's one of the maxims, or one of the axioms of culthood, is that you cannot explain to a member of a cult that they are a member of a cult. It's impossible. They have to come to that realization by thinking it through themselves. It's something that their own conscience and their own ability to think has to... Now, you can offer ideas and food for thought so that hopefully they will come to that conclusion, but you can't sit down and rationally explain to someone that they're in a cult. So like my former co-workers, etc., they're just absolutely oblivious to what I was talking about and what I was doing, because they don't see the world in terms of cult mentalities and how people absolve themselves of all responsibility to exhibit humanity, you know, and to fit all of the, to adhere to all of the social norms that have been developed by human civilization over thousands of years, because they work. They just abandon it all, and instead they follow the cult. They do things like, well, go along to get along. Don't make waves. You know, everything they say, you know, I'm sitting here saying, well, hold it. This is good, and this is evil. And this is what our employer is doing. It's evil. And they're over here, you know, saying, they don't look at it in terms of good and evil. They look at it as in terms of, well, what's the impact going to be on me? Because it's all narcissism. I'm worried about what's the impact on everybody. This is evil. We got to get rid of it so that everybody is better off. They look at it as, well, they don't look at it as good and evil. They look at it as, well, I have to go along to get along, and I can't make waves, because if I do, I might get hurt. It's all about them. Total narcissism. And their idea of helping me and advising me through all of this has been to tell me to join that cult. It ain't going to happen, folks. There's a planet out there that's very, very large. There's 7 billion people on it. And there's this little cult of several million Minnesotans that I call Meannesota that are batshit crazy. There's no way in hell I'm joining that cult. I don't care how much I like the people who tell me to join it. I don't care how much I want to have some kind of a decent relationship with these people, and I want to respect them and admire them, but I can't. They're in a cult. So being down here in this like last layer outside the Twin Cities has exposed me to the closest thing to what the rest of the world was like that I have seen since I've been here for 9 years. And I can only tell you, it's very, very refreshing. Now, of course, country folk have their own. You know, country folks keep to themselves too, but they do it in a different way. They don't do it in a cult way. They do it in a tribal way, and that makes sense. That's one of the rules of human civilization. There's nothing wrong with that. If you live in a community with 10,000 people and everyone knows everyone, if you see some stranger walking around, you know, looking in people's bedroom windows, you should take notice of that. You should fear it. If a stranger comes into town, you know, this goes back to tribal culture. Yeah, if someone you don't know walks into your tribe, you've got to be a little bit suspicious. There's a difference between being suspicious and thinking, this person is not one of us, they must die. They must be destroyed, or they must be enslaved, and they must be exploited. That's what Minnesota does. So when I came here from elsewhere, I was immediately exploited and basically enslaved. I was earning so much less money than anyone else doing my job makes. And then I ended up doing other people's jobs who didn't do their jobs while they're getting paid twice as much. That's the way a cult works. But there's no way I can tell the people in that cult. That's the problem with cults, is that they're in a cult. You can't explain it to them. They have to do the intellectual work necessary to get out of it themselves. I'm not a big believer in deprogramming. These people who kidnap people from cults and deprogram them, it is possible to do it, but again, it comes down to the individual's willingness to entertain other viewpoints once they're in the deprogramming session and they're being told things that contradict what they've been told by the cult and the cult leader. You know, some people just will not listen, and they're not going to be deprogrammed. Other people are willing to, and they can not necessarily be deprogrammed, but they can be out of the cult long enough where they start to, on their own brain power, see the world, observe the world, process the information correctly, and use critical thinking skills to realize, oh my God, I was in a cult. But, you know, in Minnesota, that's one of the dangers of this being a state-sponsored cult, of the cult dominating the state. The public education system is part of that, and therefore the public education system is designed to ensure that these people never know how to think their way out of a cult. And that's why these people are all exactly the same. They're just bland, they're boring, they think the same, they look the same, they talk the same, they have almost no sense of humor, they have no real broader knowledge of the world or history or science or anything that would serve as a conversation starter or a topic of deep discussion. They don't have that. They just have this flatlining public education that makes sure that they fit into this cult really well, and they're not going to be able to interact with the broader world very, very well at all. So anyway, I just wanted to bring up that story because the fact that the fact that this woman recognized what was going on out there tells me that she is not a Minnesotan. And she wasn't mean at all. She was a sweetheart. Love that lady. In fact, I just feel an affection for this is just a gas station. That's all it is a gas station. And I feel an affection for these people, and I feel like I see a group there. You know, there's me, and then there's this person with this personality, and this person with this sense of humor, and this person with this interest. Can you imagine that? An interest, a passion in something? Minnesotans don't have passion in anything. Bland, flatline. And that's after a day and a half, 2 days maybe, talking to a couple people in a gas station. It's ridiculous. This is why I wanted to escape from Minnesota all along, because this is the way the rest of the world is. Unless you move to where there's a cult. You know, if you move to Salt Lake City, or if you move to where the Scientologists are based, and some of the religions that are very cultish. Anyhow, I just wanted to point that out, losing my son here. I have to get ready to find a place to park my car and be stranded for 2, 3, or 4 days with this blizzard. And I would point out, along the lines of what I was saying earlier, where everyone in this fiasco, from my loud and violent neighbors and pathetic landlord all the way up to state legislator, all these people over the 3 years before I became homeless just sat and watched. They wouldn't do anything, wouldn't do their jobs, wouldn't fulfill their own obligations, nothing. They just sit and watch me suffer in torture and torment, watch me just be traumatized progressively, more and more traumatized. Just ridiculous. It would be like Delta Force sitting outside a POW camp, perfectly able to rescue POWs from Vietnam, but instead their assignment is to sit there and spy on them and just watch the POWs and see how they react to being tortured. That's what this has been like. These people could have saved me at any time if they'd just done their job, but they didn't, and they didn't care. And like I said, I'm just like roadkill to them. They see me in passing for a few moments. I was in the city council room for 2 minutes, twice. They drove by me twice, saw a carcass on the road, and forgot that it even existed. That's what they think about this human being named Paul. They don't care if I live or die. And what I was getting at with that is that with this blizzard coming up, you know, I used to be a tornado spotter for many years in the Midwest, and I know a lot about weather. The National Weather Service will tell you that the most dangerous weather in the United States is winter weather, blizzards. It kills more people than any other form of weather. It does so mainly in cars, in automobiles. Okay? So I'm sitting here with really not enough money. It takes me a good $10 to $20 a day for gasoline for me to not go anywhere. Just to sit here with the engine running to keep enough heat in here so I don't freeze. Okay? I put in $10 in gas, and it jumped up, the meter jumped up to 117 miles. So it said I had, at what it was, the rate it was expecting me to drive, city driving, it was expecting 117 miles I could get out of that. Okay? 24 hours later, it was gone. It was down to 20 miles. And it was all from me just sitting here, not even going anywhere, with the engine running to keep me warm enough to survive. Okay? So, cheap gas prices, who cares? I have to blow tons. I don't even have any money. And I'm at the point where I don't know what's left to sell. I think I have enough bucks to maybe keep me through this particular winter storm. That's about it, and that's only if I start and stop the car over and over. And don't forget, the car doesn't really start. The only way it does start is if I keep it warm, which means that if I shut it off, I have to start it up again pretty darn quickly, certainly within an hour. I would say within a half hour, or it may not start at all. If I let it sit for 2 hours, goodbye. I need a push. I need a jump. That's why it's blowing so much money on this. So, what I'm getting at there is that you have the National Weather Service saying that blizzards kill more people than any other form of weather, and it does so in cars, people who are stranded in cars. I'm about to get hit with a blizzard, and I am planning to be stranded inside a car because I can't do anything else. I am trying to plan how to survive what the National Weather Service says is the most dangerous, life-threatening weather phenomenon in the United States, and not one person in Minnesota cares. Nobody's preventing this from happening to me. Nobody's mobilizing, taking up a donation. You think the people in New Brighton, those people aren't even going to watch this video. You think they care? I'm just roadkill. That's all they think of me. So when I say this is life-threatening, I mean it, folks. I'm about to deliberately get frozen into some place. I'm not even sure where yet. And I don't know what's going to happen, because I'm going to be in a car that's covered with snow. I won't even know what's going on in the real world out there. And I'm just going to be trying to survive in here. I mean, this is third world living conditions in the state of Minnesota. So if you want to know what this website and YouTube channel, what this is all about, that's what it's about. It's about a cult that is so dangerous, so threatening to the lives of people who are outside of that cult, so vicious and mean-spirited, that even someone who did nothing wrong, did absolutely nothing wrong, and in fact made every deliberate effort to do everything right, by the book, according to the chain of command, these people will still just let me die. And that is the cult of Minnesota. I'm losing my son, so I'm going to end this video now. Thanks for listening.